Hello. Okay, I think it's English then. Well, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Carlos Bordeu. I am one of the three brothers who founded Ace Team Software. Actually, the name Ace Team comes from the three brothers, Andres and Carlos. Andres is my twin brother. And Edmundo, who is my younger brother. We started out this company. Actually, it wasn't even a company then. We were just three brothers making video games just for fun and making mods. And the company, we founded it with another person, a game programmer from who we met later at Guanaco Games, another company that develops video games in Chile, which has had quite a level of success. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But at the beginning, it was basically just the three of us making our own games. And well, I'll go through a little bit through our history, how we started, because normally when I start when I make these with these speeches, I talk to people as thinking that many might want to be aspiring game developers or game designers, or they want to start their own companies, or they want to get into the industry, and it's very difficult. Sometimes you don't know where to start. We actually get tons of emails of people who say, I really want to get into video game development. How can I do it, or how can we start? So I think hearing how we did it, it might be interesting for some people. Obviously, our path is not the only path. There are several paths, but it can open up a bit your eyes. So first of all, I'll talk about Ace Team. For those who don't know who we are, we made a PC video game called Xenoclash, and we did pretty well with it. PC Gamer magazine chose us as the independent game of 2009, and they actually, this year in February, they chose us as game number 65 of the top 100 PC games of all history. I didn't believe it. And I don't even know if I agree, but definitely it's something we didn't expect. It was a huge surprise for us. We were a finalist for the Independent Game Festival in 2009, I think, or 2008. Well, I don't remember. For excellence in visual arts. Our game is like very artistic, and the graphics are like really surreal. And we also got a nomination for the Game Developer Choice Awards. That's like the Oscars of the video game, when all the game developers gather together and they make they give the prizes to best game, best art direction, and all that in the category of best debut studio. Of all the studios who made their startup in that year, we got finalists. We didn't win, but well, at least we were nominees. So that's a little bit about our background. Now, our company hasn't been working for that long. I mean, we've been around for maybe 4 years, and we really had quite a success. I'd say more critically and in terms of nominations and prizes more than maybe economically. We're not a huge company. We haven't made millions or anything, or billions, and some indie game developers have actually made maybe more money as game developers, but we've had a very, 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 very good reception from the game we made. So before I get too deep into that, I'll start going back to our roots and talking about how we started. Basically, our origins I started making games by making modifications of other games, and this is one of the first games I made with my brothers. This was done on a Mac Plus. We didn't even finish it in the Mac Plus. I think Andres uses all the art for the game, and he put it in a Visual Basic in Excel for economy programming class, and then he finished the programming of the game. But this is a game we were designing and making when I was, I don't remember, 12 or 14. And it was on a Mac Plus. The graphics are not retro because we chose them to be retro. It's because that was the state of the art of computers in that time. Black and white monitor, 3 20, 200 pixels. It's very, very basic. And we were inspired by Shadowgate, and we made our own sort of slideshow sort of game, adventure game. Never released it anywhere except as a April Fool's joke. We said we were going to cancel Xenoclash and start making this game instead, and you can actually play it in that web address, www.asteam.cl/retro. If you want to play it, it's for free. So we started making our own games, and little by little, as computer technology got better and better, we started getting into other games and seeing. I was a really big fan of Doom, the original Doom, fighting demons and all this first-person shooter games. We were really marveled at it. But for us, as brothers, we started seeing a lot of potential in downloading the editing tools. You could see the tools of the game and see, wow, I can change the graphics of the game, make my own levels, stuff like that. So it was really, really, really something really impressive for us. And we worked in a couple of years, and we totally transformed Doom, the classic Doom, into Batman Doom. That's a pretty lame name, but but that's what we did. We put Batman, Gotham City, the Joker, everything. We put all the bad guys, and we released it as a modification. Mods are basically this concept that you just grab the original game and change parts of the programming, or change parts of the art, or change parts of the sound and make your own game. And the total conversion, like the ones we made, is when you basically change so much of the original game, you have an entirely new game based on the original one. So we made this huge total conversion of Doom. It took us like 2 years, and we entirely changed it. Released it for free in the internet and started seeing what people thought about it, and that was, for us, that was it. I mean, it was fun just to see what people thought about it, and like, we weren't doing it like thinking about, oh, I'm going to be a professional game developer because of this. It was just for fun. And our next project was a little bit more complicated. We took Quake 3 Arena, multiplayer only game, and we modified it and made a single player total conversion called the Dark Conjunction. It was a lot more difficult this time because we had to work with polygons, textures, graphics, a lot of technology that wasn't present in Doom. And also, we had to really highly modify the game in order to achieve what we wanted. Now, what's really interesting about this is that a couple of things I want to mention between the jump of maybe Batman Doom into the Dark Conjunction is that Batman Doom was done entirely by us, the three brothers. But for the Dark Conjunction, this was no longer possible. The three of us, we were basically good at being artists. We did a lot of scripting and some very basic programming, you could say, sound design, level design, but we weren't programmers. And when we needed to do the Dark Conjunction, and we envisioned this project we really want to do, we realized we needed help. There was no way we were going to be able to learn to program to start making a game. Especially considering that all the design part, the art part, and many other of the aspects of developing this new project were even more complex in our own areas of expertise. So it required us to grow as a team, still not company. And this is one of the critical aspects of video game development that is so hard to achieve. Video games are not done by one or two people. These days they're done by many. And it's not just a problem of volume, that you need a lot of people to make video games. You need people from different expertise. You need programmers, you need artists, you need designers. So at this point we reach a point in which we needed to find someone else, and we added that person into the team, but you need to coordinate with a totally different person, and finding the people you need to develop your project, especially if you're going to do a game that's going to take a development time of a year or 2 years, it's hard to find the people that will be motivated for that long time. Usually, you get people really enthusiastic with the game, and oh, looks like a lot of fun. Let's do it. But after a couple of months, you're working very hard, and this person either has tests in the university or has a job, and he can't really help out that much. So that's one of the really hard parts. So basically, we were working on all these mods, and we finished the Dark Conjunction. It was also released, no money involved. We still weren't a company. And at certain point to Chile arrived some Argentinian people who wanted to establish a video game development company, a real company, and they created Guanaco Games. I don't know if you know about Guanaco Games, but Guanaco Games is one of the lead game developers of Latin America. I worked there for 4 years since we started at Guanaco. I mean, my brother and Andres and I, we started working for the company, and we made several games, started with PC and ended up making Xbox Live Arcade games. And for us, this was a step in which we had the opportunity to get into more established into a company, and which we learned part of how you make you step out of something that you're doing a bit more as a hobby and get into more something that you're doing as a business. We learned a lot from that experience. As game developers, there wasn't really that much learning in terms of learning tools or technology or anything, because basically Guanaco started with mostly people from Ace Team. At the beginning it was Andres, a programmer from Ace Team, and a different programmer, and we gave them the sort of the brains part of the operation. Little by little the company grew, and to make a rather long story short, eventually we separated from the company because we had our own interest in doing our own games. We felt that we were very creative people, and that we wanted to do our own stuff. We didn't want to do what other people were asking us. But the important thing to mention about Guanaco is that it helped us understand also that how a game business operates, in which you are not simply working in your spare time. You're working 8-hour days or longer. They actually get a lot longer when you're reaching milestones. Milestones is a word that's used in video game development to say that you're going to give partial part of the product you're making, and a lot of terminology and experience from what it means to get into the video game business. But as I was saying, we were working at Guanaco, but we were never satisfied as ourselves. Andres and I, we were never satisfied with just working for a company. We always felt we had like a lot of creative input that we weren't capable of giving, because we were working basically a company that was asking us to do specific games, not our games. So meanwhile, while we were working at Guanaco Games, we were working on our own prototype of Xenoclash, the game that I'm going to show you in a while. I actually should have started maybe showing videos for those who don't know anything about it. But here's another important thing I want to maybe make people think about, is that our ultimate goal, our dream, was to make in our own company and making our own titles. And for that, I worked really hard, and we worked really hard in after hours, at the free time from our regular job, to make that dream come true. And we were doing this even when we were doing games not for money, not as a company. We had to sacrifice a lot of our spare time in order to learn the tools, to make what we thought we wanted to do. And it requires an enormous sacrifice at the beginning, because you're basically have to start from zero. You have to gather this team and convince them that you have something. As a group, you have to be convinced that you have something. And in real life, people have jobs, people have studies, so you have to, basically, this dream, you have to fit it in your spare time. And while we were working at Guanaco Games and having shifts of days of work that could end up being almost 12 hours, sometimes I had to go back from work and start working on Xenoclash and seeing what we were going to do with the prototype. Now, we didn't make Xenoclash entirely while I was working at Guanaco Games. We only made a small prototype, which we showed to Valve. And this was the interesting thing. This is the game. I'm going to show a video shortly now after I explain a couple of things. But the interesting thing about this screenshot is this is the first image that we produced of the game with which we tempted Valve to give us a licensing agreement to make the game. Who knows Valve, the company who made Half-Life? Okay, pretty much everyone. It's pretty famous. Basically, we took the modding tools of Half-Life 2, the regular game everyone played, and we started making our own game, just like we had done with The Dark Conjunction and Batman Doom. It was nothing different. We were doing the same with a more complex set of tools, with newer technology, but it was the same thing. This was a Half-Life 2 mod. We didn't have any licensing agreement. We didn't have any access to technology that people didn't have. We had the same tools everyone had on the internet. The only difference with Xenoclash and our other projects is that we didn't make it public. We made no public announcement that we were making the game. What we did is we started developing it in secret, almost like a private mod. And once we felt we had something worthy of showing, instead of showing it publicly, we showed it directly to Valve and no one else. Now, is this the best way to go? Is it not the best way to go? You could argue that sometimes when you make a mod, you get a lot of media press, and it might help you get the attention of publishers and maybe strike a deal into developing a game. In our case, what we wanted to get Valve not to finance the development of the game for us, but to give us some sort of agreement in which we could, one, use their engine, use their software so that we could sell this, and number two, to be able to put it on Steam. Steam, the digital distribution platform that they use for games, that's become such a important thing for PC gaming in these years. I'll show you a video of Xenoclash. So for those who haven't seen or heard about it. Wow.
The Corwoods are not slaves of reality, so they can be insane. Oximeter just walks in a straight line without letting anything change his path. And that's what Oximeter does. Erminia peed on herself and starved to death anonymously. Cabell ate people, and that's just what he had to do. Pelham needed to be invisible, so he removed the eyes from anything that could see him.
But why would he do that?
Why not? free.
Well, that's a preview of Rock of Ages. Sorry, Xenoclash, not Rock of Ages. This was one of the promotional videos we used to introduce a set of really crazy characters that we had in the game called the Corridor of the Free, part of the game story. But the game had this very, really unusual art style, this very surreal style that was very uncommon for most people who saw it. And that was part of what led us to succeed in not only convincing Valve that we had something really unique, but also to convince to get the game to be successful. And a trend for us in Ace Team, something that we established as a studio, is that we make creative games. We make different games. Our next project, Rock of Ages, is a boulder game. Basically, you play as a freaky boulder that runs over little people in different art periods of history, and it's like a real-time strategy thing meets Marble Madness. I'll show the video also so we can get here. This one's quite funny. Lights.
You shall not have.
Rock of Ages. Available August 31st. You can buy it in Steam, Xbox Live Arcade, or PSN. I hope we sell a lot. So, we really, with this game, we wanted something more accessible, something funny. We wanted to do something not so maybe bizarre as Xenoclash, though it still is bizarre, but at least maybe more accessible, more not maybe so much for the hardcore gamer, maybe more for the casual player, but at the same time keeping the game interesting for more the hardcore gamer. Here's a screenshot of Rock of Ages. It's, as you can see, we're using our sources of inspiration for our titles are usually very unconventional. We chose for these paintings and art from the medieval period, Renaissance, Rococo paintings, Greek art. And for Xenoclash, we used Hieronymus Bosch art. We used influences as the movie The Dark Crystal, punk fantasy, lots of like really unconventional types and influences of art. So that's a bit very, very quick brush of our history. I think it's really interesting for people to understand how we got to do what we do. There's millions of more details of how we got to the point of developing the games that we're developing. For instance, there's all the problem of getting to become a console game developer. It's not the same making games for PC. When you're making games for consoles, you need a sort of a license to be able to produce them. And the really quick answer is, how do you get that? Is, well, basically you first have to be successful maybe in PC. Or at least you have to have some really strong prototype which will convince Microsoft or Sony that you're doing something interesting. So let's get down to the question some people might be interested in. And so how do you start in this increasingly competitive business, especially in Latin America? You have several problems. You could run them down to much more than 4, but you could say that the costs, the investment, the initial investment is one of the big problems. You need a lot of money to make a video game. The time, games are getting longer and longer to produce. You need, depending on the game, obviously, some games aren't so long, but for a game like Xenoclash or Rock of Ages, we're talking about a year to 2 years. Number 3, you need, how can you solve the problem of getting the people, the team, the experience? That's another problem. And number 4, the competitiveness. Obviously, at this point in time, video games have become to be extremely competitive. You have products coming from all parts of the world, from Japan, Europe, Russia, North America, and some really, really creative people working in the industry. Number 1, the cost of the investment. I think there's really burns down to case by case. There's not much I can say not much how I can help you get an insight on how we did it. I basically grabbed all my savings that I earned when I was working in Guanaco Games, and I invested all my money and started. The brothers, each one of us gathered all our money and just put it in the bank and started using that money to develop Xenoclash. And we got lucky because we had people from Russia got interested in the game before it was released, so we got some royalty advance payments that helped us out develop the game. But in the beginning, Xenoclash was developed in the living room of the apartment where I'm living. We put all the computers there. It was indie development. Not each one of us was paying themselves salaries. Those who needed it, we paid. Those who didn't need it, we didn't pay, or we paid less, or we figured it out. But obviously, we had very limited resources, and for the Americans and for the people who have seen the game, when they know the budget or when they've heard of how much we invested, it's ridiculous. It's very low, and how many people worked on it is also a very little team. So the cost and the time, it really burns down to how you can make it work. It's a very personal thing. Some people sometimes get some help from funding from government. If you can go to, we have Corfo in Chile that helps innovative projects start, and there might be something similar here in Brazil, but it's kind of hard to convince that you're going to make something really unique with video games, especially when you have to talk to politicians or the government or stuff like that. It's like a totally different world. And the team, the experience is another problem I mentioned earlier. Obviously, it really burns down to getting a really good core team of people who will help you out and who will have the same vision you have. You really need a united front in order to make something good. So I'll go down to the competitiveness, which is probably the area where I can give more maybe suggestions, and where I usually find many people making maybe some mistakes, or at least not focusing well their efforts, because a lot of people have come up to us and said and showed us maybe their projects or told us what do we do. And one of the things I really feel sometimes they make some mistakes is on some things I'm going to talk about now. Number 1 thing that I would recommend to anyone making any video game and starting from scratch: please plan global. Try to make a video game that is planned for the global market, not for your region. That doesn't mean you have to exclude any content that you can create from your own culture. That doesn't mean that if you have a great idea that comes from something you have from your own culture that you have to discard it. No. I think that can be pretty good. I don't know if you played Stalker, the Ukrainian first-person shooter, but they transformed the whole Chernobyl disaster into this whole fiction of monsters and everything. They took something very personal from that country and transformed it into something that sold very well internationally. But they made the game in English. They didn't make the game in Russian. Obviously, they did make a Russian version, but they sponsored the game around everywhere in English, and that's very important. Now, what's this? What am I showing here? This is Steamworks. Basically, it shows, I cannot show all the numbers because I'm not allowed, but I can show percentages. And a lot of people in Chile initially asked us, why did you make a game for the Americans? Why didn't you make a game about a national hero or something like that? And well, the most obvious answer is because those are the numbers in yellow of copies of Xenoclash that we sold in Chile. This is the number might have increased, but I don't think it's double than that. Chile is a very, very, very small region for video game development, for video game sales coming from Steam, which was our sales platform, and it is becoming the standard for all PC game distribution. 167 copies, you can't even buy lunch with that. I mean, it's not enough money. That's 167, not 167,000 or anything. Chile represents 0% of our actual sales of Xenoclash in the PC platform. Important thing to notice, all Latin America represents only a 1%. All Latin America combined. If you see there, United States, 41%. So who is the first target audience? United States. Who's number 2? United Kingdom. Number 3, Germany. PC gaming is very strong in Germany. So if you start to see which people are buying the game we made, you actually say, well, Spanish wasn't a really big priority for us in the Latin language we had to translate the game into. It would have been better for us to translate into German before translating into Spanish. I don't know if every game will sell better in the US than maybe in Europe, but I've never heard of any game that at least sells in front page of Steam that sold much better in some other region and that sold poorly in the United States. The United States is a very, very big market. So you have to take that into account. If you're making a game which excludes the Americans, you're basically digging a grave for your own. I mean, there's so much potential market that you can get out of making a game which considers them. And there's no problem with, I don't think it's such a big challenge thinking your game before and trying to make it so that it's interesting for everyone. When I say all these things, I don't want it to sound like I'm saying I made a video game and I planned it for the Americans. That's not the case for the North Americans, the United States. We didn't make a game. We made the game we wanted to make. We made the game about these crazy creatures in this crazy world, and we didn't care about for who it was. In the end, a lot of Russian people liked it, a lot of American people liked it, a lot of people from different parts of the world liked it. That wasn't our motivation, but at least we knew we couldn't exclude them. They had to be part of the plan. Number 2. Stand apart from the crowd, and this is something I also see so often done by teams starting their own projects. I know most of you, or many of you, are gamers, and you could probably tell me the names of those 6 different games. But if you're a normal person and you don't play too much video games, those could perfectly be 6 pictures of the same video game. Normal person wouldn't really notice this, that they're different games. There are already too many war-themed shooters. Unless you have a really, really original idea with something really, really unique about it, if it doesn't have a really interesting twist, don't go for it. I mean, there's no way you can compete with Call of Duty. If we would have tried to make a Call of Duty game, we would have sucked at doing it, and we wouldn't have been successful. They've already established their market. They have dominance over it. I don't think it's the way to go. Maybe some people have been able to get some sort of world war or military shooter success with smaller products, but I don't really think it's the best thing to do. Same thing for here. Space Marines, then again, they're overdone. We've seen them so many times, and it's not that these games are boring. It's not that these games are bad. In no way am I saying that. I actually have a lot of fun with them. I love Call of Duty. I've played all these games. I enjoy them very much, but I understand that as a small independent studio who's trying to accomplish something and stand out in this increasingly complex industry, I cannot fight against these monsters. They are too big. These are games which are too huge. I mean, many of these games have development budgets of $40 million. And believe me, I didn't have $40 million to start making Xenoclash. I would be in Bahamas or somewhere else. And if I had that amount of money, we didn't have that money. We had a fraction of it, and like not even a 1%. So being creative is very, very important. And 89%, I didn't do like maybe go through a very strict study of this, but you could, by taking a quick look, you could easily see that 89% of first-person games are war-themed shooters. A very big percentage you get are war plus science fiction, and you could maybe put some of those in none of the above, but they do have some elements of maybe war. But if you see in the first-person genre, which is incredibly competitive, it's one of the hardest genres to start working, and I don't know even why we were so crazy to start in such a difficult genre. It's saturated. The war and firearms simulation sort of game is too saturated. There's too much investment. Too many people have done it, and too many really talented people are doing it, and too many really talented people are getting paid millions to make them better and better every year. So there's no way. So when you draw inspirations, when you try to draw inspiration for what you want to make for your startup video game or for the project you want to make, don't think in the movie Saving Private Ryan. Don't think in maybe the Hollywood blockbuster, which many games are copying. Think out of the box. What's that? That's a painting of the Temptations of Saint Anthony. Really bizarre. Use of color is really unique. But have you seen any video game that looks like that? I certainly haven't. Maybe Xenoclash. I can't even think of any other. But we took references from things that you don't see. And that's really important. And you see it done by many, many, many indie game development studios. They're the ones that are pushing the most creative ideas. Why? It's not just because they're cooler or maybe because they're more creative. It's because also of how the system works. The big game companies are controlled by the big publishers, and the big publisher want to see sales. And a big publisher will maybe not understand, I want to do this really surreal game based on the paintings of the Temptations of Saint Anthony. What are you talking about? They won't understand. But if you say, I want to do Call of Duty, but with more machine guns, yes, they understand that. And they know Call of Duty sells millions. So they invest a lot of money on those types of games for obvious reasons. But they put that money on big companies which also have really high production values. Production values is a very, very, very important word here. The production values is basically how much you're investing in the development of a video game to make it better. For instance, if I make a game, I could hire the voice acting Tom Cruise to make the voice acting of the game, to make it even more impressive. Obviously, an indie game studio will never be able to do that. So they invest a lot of money on every aspect of the game, and obviously they end up with very polished products. So it's very important to understand that when you're starting a video game company and where you're very small, you have very low production values, which you have to... It's not that you have low production values. You really can't make really high production values with many elements of the games, and you have to disguise them. And that's something maybe I'm going to get into a little bit now. What did we do with Xenoclash? This is what we did. The antagonist of the game is father-mother. It's this bird-like creature who is a hermaphrodite, who is the father and the mother of the main character of the game. The main character of the game is the son of that blue bird thing, and that's his family. And it's the story of a man who goes in a conflict with his family in this really crazy, surreal world. And most people raise an eyebrow when they hear that and say, these people are deranged. I can't say how many times people said that we were doing the game induced by drugs or some sort of smoking something really weird, but we didn't. We didn't. But the truth is that we really made something very unusual. The use of color, the sources of inspiration, all that. Now, how would I put Xenoclash if I put it against games like Crisis and everything else in terms of its production values? It's obviously not as well polished. It obviously doesn't have the same level of graphics. It obviously doesn't have the same size. Size is maybe the key element here. Xenoclash looks pretty good. It looks maybe for an average person comparable to some really bigger games. It looks like a next-gen-ish sort of game. It uses the source engine pretty well. But when we started making the game, we realized that the only way we could get that level of detail into the game was if we made it very small. That's why it lasts 3 hours. That's why most of the scenarios are combat arenas that are relatively small. And the game design was completely done around that limitation. You have to design based on your limitations. You cannot make a game and say, I want it to be the size of the Elder Scrolls Oblivion. I want vast world made of hundreds of cities with hundreds of NPCs with hundreds of characters, because you don't have the manpower. You'll never have it. Not at the beginning. It's very hard. So one of the first things that you really have to do is think, what can I do and what can I achieve at a good level, a competitive level, which doesn't really look terrible compared to what the really big companies are doing, in order to be able to do a game that stands out. And this is something that I find very important. A successful niche title can potentially perform better than an averagely produced mass market one. That means that's basically what I've been saying. If you try to make a very big game, a very big, like, elaborate game, but it's only average, and because you try to do like a war-themed game, and you try to put lots of levels, lots of weapons, lots of features on it, and it ends up being an average Call of Duty, it'll probably bomb, won't sell very well. But a niche title, now that we have digital distribution and the whole world, you might end up having something that a lot of people will like. And for a startup company, that can be something really, potentially really interesting. It was very important for us. So creativity is key. It's very important to be creative, and not only creative. When I speak about creativity, I'm not only speaking of what I'm going to do or how I'm going to do it. It's more how I'm going to do it. Because you may have a very crazy idea, but you also have to use creativity on your production process. So how I'm going to make this game look better, but using very simple art, or using, maybe you won't want to do photorealistic art. Maybe you want to do something that looks like these sort of maybe abstract paintings that don't require me to have so many people working on the art. Or there are many different ideas. It depends on any game. But let's say, for example, who remembers the Zelda game, the cartoon version for the Nintendo GameCube? What's the Wind Waker game? Obviously, many people, those who played it, will really understand immediately when I speak of that. The production values of the game, you look at it and it's amazing. It looks like a cartoon. It looks really great. But how many polygons do the enemies have? How many texture work? How hard it is it to produce the art for the game? it's a lot simpler because of the type of art style they chose. It's a Zelda game, for those who don't know it, that looks like a Saturday morning cartoon. It's like with very simple colors and not lots of really meticulous detail. You don't see lots of very complex structures. It's basically more sort of clean design, and it was considered to be one of the best games of its generation, and it's a really, really, really good game, and done by Nintendo, not a small company. So I'll be going. So I'll change now a bit, maybe talk about the challenges that the local industry has. This can apply to any country, I think. As I was saying, high production costs, that's one of the problems. Lack of trained professionals, that's another problem. Lack of investments or tax benefits. Tax benefits is something that can be really important for the video game industry also. It's in Canada, actually. I don't really understand exactly how they do it. I haven't gotten deep into it, but I know there are tax benefits for the video game industry, and that they discount taxes for employees or something like that for people who are working in this industry, and it ends up being that the Canadian video game developer doesn't end up being much more expensive than other countries, maybe as Chile. It's not so much more expensive, but pushing the government to do something about it is definitely something interesting. And support to innovation, also something that's very critical, getting some government funds to get money and put it on innovative products. I'll be closing a bit, like talking a bit again about digital distribution. It's definitely the way to go for startup studios. These days, making retail games is something that's very, very hard. My mobile phone is sounding, how embarrassing. Okay. These platforms, they allow smaller developers to succeed. We've seen some really, really innovative and great games come out of really small teams. You've got World of Goo, which was for Nintendo WiiWare, which I didn't put here. You have Braid, which was launched for Xbox Live Arcade. You have many games in Steam. All these platforms allow for smaller developers to make some really interesting titles. Definitely, that's the way you want to plan. And if you're wanting to start a game, you really want to start with something small. I would always emphasize that people start with something small, and if the first small game sucks, the second, maybe not so small one, will be better. But if you make a really big game and it sucks, you wasted maybe 2 years of your life. Maybe with a small game, you just wasted 6 months. And you learned a lot from the first game. It's better to start planning simple. I see a lot of people trying to do big games that are beyond what they can do. Retail, it's possible. You can. We actually did get Xenoclash to be retailed in different regions. The North American copy is not present there. We actually even got it in the United States. But the bulk of our sales, I would say more than 95%, come from digital distribution, Steam alone. It tops everything. All the boxed versions combined, I don't think they would even be, 10% of what Steam did. So it's not necessary anymore, and definitely not for the size of studios which are starting up. Retail is obviously significant still for multi-million products like Call of Duty and the big games, but forget about it if you want to start making your debut, your first company, and making your own games. And that's it. Questions?
Yeah. Alguém tem perguntas? Quem não souber falar inglês, a gente pode traduzir. Ou se souber falar espanhol, pode falar espanhol também.
You've told about the government help funding games. In the case of Zero Clash, it didn't happen. It wasn't possible. What?
It's actually quite a funny question because we got government help and funding for Rock of Ages, but not for Xenoclash, and we didn't get it for Xenoclash because they didn't consider it innovative enough, which is why I say that it's so hard to talk with politicians and people from the government because you're just making a video game. What's innovative about that? There are so many. So they won't understand that you're making an innovative video game. And many of the times, the way you convince them, the way we got them to give us money for the development of Rock of Ages, is that instead of saying we're going to make an innovative video game, we're going to make an innovative process of how to produce a video game. And that might be interesting for them because you're doing like something which can be applied as a production process. Next question.
Sorry. I was grabbing some news. O Moacir tem uma notícia meio legal aqui pra gente. Mas, mais perguntas? Ok.
There will be a Xenoclash 2 or something.
The Xenoclash 2 question. Very likely, but I can't confirm.
Okay, thank you.
After you showed Xenoclash to Valve, did they just the production still? It was you in your living room with your team, or they give you any kind of support instead of the program and the engine to make the game?
Sorry, you asked me if when we showed it to Valve, if we had programmers working on the title, or
yeah, after you showed them, what kind of help did you receive from them?
Okay, no, for Valve, for developing the game per se, they don't do anything. They just say, okay, I like what you do. Valve is actually, you think of them as like this huge company with all very strict standards of development and everything, but they're very easygoing. They're actually a bit disorganized. We've had some problems with a bit of their organization, but I'll tell you how they choose games which they're going to put on. At least then, when we submitted Xenoclash to them, the way that they chose it, and this was their official way, this is what they told us is how they selected games. They received many games from different places, and the person testing the game, if enough people gather around him behind on the computer and say, wow, this looks cool, then okay, it passes. That's it. And apparently with the Xenoclash, a lot of people gather around and say, oh, this looks really weird. And so that's how we got them to give us the licensing agreement. But it's not a very organized, it's not like they put you through tests. Maybe now with Steam, the size it is, they've changed the standards because they have so many games. But they simply give you the terms, and they give. In our case, since we were using Source Engine, the engine of Half-Life, they had to give us a licensing agreement. But what most people will pursue is the Steam licensing agreement. That's what's more relevant with them.
What was the size of the team to Xenoclash?
7.
And what's the proportion of programmers and designers?
1 programmer, 6 art designers. No, the programmers suffered very much. It was 1 programmer, but that's very unusual. It's not supposed to be that way. We started with someone else who quit sort of halfway, and his code had to be rewritten. It was complicated. Definitely poor David, who is the 4th founder of Ace Team with the rest of the brothers. He's the lead programmer. He said, for any other project, I need someone else.
Mas alguém ainda tem tempo para pergunta?
So, how much did Xenoclash actually cost?
Sort of, we've published. It's supposed to be sort of a lot like not the official number we throw out in the press, which is just like a estimation is $200,000, but we didn't have that money, and we didn't. That's the combination of many things. It includes a big part of that is the royalty advance payments that we got from a company Novidisk, which were our publishers in Russia. We got really lucky with that. For some reason, when we started presenting the game to publishers around the world, the more conventional publishers, the European and American publishers, said, this is a game that will be credited by your peers in the industry. People will say this is pretty good, but the average consumer will not bind with it, will not understand it. It's too strange. So no one was really willing to help us, and that didn't happen with the Russians. The Russian publishers actually started fighting over the game before it was even finished. And we had this deal with one publisher, and suddenly Novidisk starts, and we were doing it for X amount, the royalty advance payments, for this X amount of money, and suddenly another one comes up and says, no, I'll up the bid. And they eventually fought each other until the figure doubled. We didn't even expect that. We were ready to accept the original sum because we had no experience. We didn't know how much we were supposed to charge, and we had the luck that the game seemed to have struck a chord with the Russian publishers. And I've seen the Russian games market; they really like crazy sort of games. So it was.
Hi, Carlos. I would like to know exactly how much time you spent developing Rock of Ages, especially how much time you put into prototyping, effective production, QA, stuff like that.
Okay. Rock of Ages was kind of a... When we finished Xenoclash, we wanted to do a smaller game, a really smaller game, and eventually Rock of Ages grew to be quite a big game. It wasn't the original plan. We wanted to do a PC game. I'd say Rock of Ages, we thought it out to be a small PC game. We started working with not Unity, the other engine, which actually they closed. No. What's the name? Well, I don't remember this other engine that competes against Unity. The company crashed.
Torque.
We started with them, and when they moved on to Torque 3D, we were kind of curious: do we use their technology? Don't we know? And then suddenly, Epic launches UDK, and we said, "This looks interesting," and we dived into their technology and decided to use that. And as we started using UDK, we created a prototype of a sort of prototype video of what we wanted the game to look like, and we went to GDC with that, and the publishers loved it. Atlus, who were working with it, immediately liked it, and the people from Epic liked it, and we really knew we had something in our hands which was bigger. So the original game was planned for like an 8-month development cycle, but it's actually growing. It's grown. Right now we're completing the PlayStation 3 and PC builds. The Xbox One is pretty much over, and we're already past a year of development time, which is a bit scary because you initially plan for 8 months. And the production budget grows with each month.
Tem alguém nessa parte aqui porque eu vou ter que correr para lá. Ok.
When you have an idea of a game to develop, how do you say, wow, now I have a good idea, let's develop this because it's probably going to be a good game?
That's a very interesting question because of something I've seen, a very big difference between something we've done different to Wanako Games. Wanako Games continues to function. Well, they're no longer Wanako Games. They're part of a Canadian company called Behavior Interactive. And for a long time, they were trying to do pitch for projects for games, and they made prototype after prototype after prototype, like basic functional versions of their games, and they tried to sell that to publishers, and they had very little success. They made dozens of prototypes, and they weren't being able to sell it. Unlike the case of what we've done, we've actually tempted more publishers with videos, trailers, produced with video game technology of what we want our games to look like. And why is it, I think, better, at least for us? Obviously, maybe you do want to have, maybe if you've never made any game, maybe a publisher will feel a bit uneasy of working with you if you only have a video. But the video, the people who buy, the publishers who look at video games, they're not really open to understanding that you have a partial product, that you're showing something that maybe the art isn't as good as it should be, the functionality isn't as good as it should be. But when you're making a trailer of what you would like the game to look at, using game technology, you can perfectly pre-render something. It's much more flashy, and it immediately shows a concept of what you want the game to be like. And the suit behind this company who will pay you to make understands that too. He doesn't understand prototypes with boxes that are supposed to be your game hero. You can tell him, no, but he's a fantastic game. He will be a knight with a sword, but he just sees a box, and it won't work. Even if you have fantastic gameplay, it's very difficult to sell games like that. It doesn't really work that anymore. And as how do we come to a point where we think we have a good game is we actually come up with dozens of ideas that end up in the writing boards and that don't really work that much. And once we're convinced of an idea, we produce this sort of trailer and say, okay, let's go forward with this, and we debate about the strengths of what we're doing.
Carlos, felicitaciones por tu proyecto, es muy lindo.
Gracias.
Me gustó muchísimo. Yo gostaria de perguntar cuál la dificultad que vosotros tuvieron en hacer un videojuego tan artístico. ¿Cuáles fueron tus inspiraciones? ¿Cómo surgieron las primeras ideas?
¿Respondo en español?
Sí, yeah, okay. Por favor.
Yo creo que el tema de hacer un juego artístico para nosotros fue bastante natural debido a que los tres hermanos éramos muy artistas desde un inicio. Nuestra motivación era desarrollar un poco ese arte y lo que teníamos muy claro es que queríamos hacer algo muy creativo, muy distinto y muy único, muy personal. No hicimos ningún focus group, no hicimos ningún estudio de mercado, no tratamos de hacer nada que creyéramos que a la gente le iba a gustar. Yo creo que vino mucho del corazón, nosotros, del alma, de decir, pucha, esto a nosotros nos gusta mucho, ojalá le guste a mucha gente. Y el desafío tecnológico, yo diría, nuevamente, que yo creo que los juegos, cuando uno hace las cosas de tal forma que sean artísticamente muy únicas, el desafío tecnológico tal vez empieza a pasar un poco a un segundo plano. Es más importante tal vez la forma y el color y los conceptos más abstractos que el detalle mismo de cada elemento. Entonces tú puedes tal vez tener muchos elementos del juego que no están tan perfectos, que no están tan bien hechos, pero el global se ve mucho más claramente representa una idea que es única, e isso é importante.
Espero que ninguém tenha se arrependido de pedir para eu falar inglês primeiro, porque entendeu tudo agora. Quem mais quer pergunta, só para eu dar uma olhada aqui? Ok.
Hi, I remember reading that you chose Unreal Engine because you wanted to focus the console market also, not just the PC gaming market. Now we see Valve launching Portal 2 with Source Engine, probably have modifiers, but Source Engine, and Portal 2 is available to all consoles. Do you plan going back to Source? What do you think about that?
Honestly, no. We wouldn't change Unreal for Source for one really big reason. Valve, their technology is great, but they're not really in the licensing of technology business. Epic is. So the tools of Epic they totally are much more well thought for studios than Valve. Valve basically, when they give you their engine, they're basically giving you their game, not really their engine. For instance, if you want to do a very different game with their technology, it's going to take you more work because they're not really giving you a set of tools to work on an engine. They're basically giving you the tools that they made to make a specific game. For instance, when we made the change from the PC build of Xenoclash to the Xbox, we had to do an upgrade of the engine to we were using the orange box version, and we had to change to the Left 4 Dead, and many aspects of the game broke. Why? Because they were two different strands of code. One was being developed only for Half-Life Episode 2, and the other was being developed and they broke part of the game. So they're not since they're not consistently in the business, they obviously don't have the same level of tools, and tools are, in the end, I think tools are even more important than technology. Not to say that Unreal is any less than Valve. I'd actually say they have more high definition, more complicated engine. But what really tempted us into staying with them is the tool set.
I just wanted to know why Xenoclash. Why did you choose this name?
There's actually a long story behind why Xenoclash we made a game, and there's something I totally missed in this speech, which is I didn't say when we failed. And Xenoclash is actually the father, the son of another game that we made called Xenozoic using Lithtex Jupyter system, which is an engine made for a game called No One Lives Forever, made by Monolith. We made a 2-year demo, like a private mod, similar to Xenoclash, and when we finished it, it was terrible. It was bad. It wasn't good enough. And we weren't capable of convincing anyone that it was a viable game. We learned a lot about it, a lot about the experience of making a game by making this title and failing to succeed with it. But we were always, when after our failure, we realized that it wasn't really that we had a bad idea. The problem is that we tried to be too ambitious, and that's why I again say that it's so important to plan based on your weaknesses. We learned from our weaknesses when we made Xenozoic, this previous game, and we failed to do it because it was too big. It had too many weapons, too many enemies. We tried to make, so we had something larger, maybe in scope. Obviously, it was a demo of something that was going to be larger, but that by being so large, we weren't capable of doing a more polished experience. So we felt that Xenoclash was a correcting of that problem. We took this Xenozoic game and we said, okay, how can we make this game but make it good? What we need to eliminate? And most of the times you realize that the success comes from removing stuff, not really adding. Many times you have ideas, and you have like this Frankenstein of different game design aspects. And when we came down to what we needed to do in order to make Xenoclash succeed, there were only 2 aspects which had to be really, really good about the game. The art design had to be surreal. It had to be like really crazy. That's the first element, and we really, really worked on it. And number 2, the first-person combat mechanics. We forgot about all the rest. The rest was yeah, it can be there as long as it doesn't interfere. But we focus on only 2 elements for the game, and that's really intelligent. Try not to put more emphasis than 1 or 2 elements, and really make, if you're going to make a game about this, make that single element so good that when people say, oh, it's the best version of this I've ever seen. Actually, a lot of reviewers said that we had implemented the best implementation of first-person combat mechanics ever in a video game by that time, and I think it's something we're really proud of.
Yeah, I have a question too. You talked a lot about how you approach publishers with only a tech demo made of pre-rendered stuff or in-game, but not really gameplay implemented. How do you see crowdfunding for small studios and stuff like, for example, what Minecraft did, that was selling an alpha version and unlocking the rest? So instead of following publishers, exactly big companies, how do you see following the public for funding?
I don't have that much experience with how well that works. I don't know how many people are doing it, because I have the impression we often hear of those who succeed, but we don't know about those who don't. And I know of some developers who have been able to work that way. And I think Minecraft is such one of those examples that's so successful, that is so specific, that you really can't say, if I do what Minecraft did, I will succeed, because it's just one of those games that really did what it had to do at the right time with the right concept. It's a really innovative game, so it's difficult to put yourself in the mindset of replicating what they did. And selling your game to the crowd, it might not be a bad idea if you don't find any other way. I mean, definitely trying to approach publishers when you're starting out might be difficult and might not be the way to go. I would definitely say that if you find yourself in a situation where it's the only way you can start up, it's better than nothing, and I would approach it. Why didn't we? I'd say basically because of the history of our company. We had made so many mods just for fun, and when we approached Valve, I wouldn't even say that we were so clear about what we wanted from them. It was more them that they offered us this very specific partnership with them, and I think eventually you can plan many things on how to do it, what's the best way to go, but your focus has to be on how do I do something that's unique and different and that can be successful on its own, and if it's good enough, it'll find its way. We never thought we were going to do it this way. We always thought the more traditional way, the approaching the publishers. And when I talk about approaching the publishers, it's more a recent thing where we're doing the trailer thing and this pre-rendered stuff. We're doing it now that we're already a company with quite a level of recognition. But it's not so easy to start out maybe if you don't have anything published. So the other thing is, anyone making a game here, any game, please submit it to the Independent Game Festival. You don't lose anything. It only costs $100, and when you submit, judges, experts from around the industry have to play your game, and they have to give you a grading. They have to check it and say it's good, it's bad, what I like, what I don't like. Being a finalist for the Independent Game Festival is really hard. It's not easy, but what's the worst? There's not much to risk. I mean, it's only $100, and you actually get a lot of exposition, because many people check all the games that are submitted to the Independent Game Festival. Rock Paper Shotgun, a very big gaming blog, they often talk about the games of Independent Game Festival, and if you actually end up being a finalist, you get to go to GDC, and they show you as a finalist, and you have to show your game, and it's a really great opportunity. It costs nothing, and I was a judge for one of the years of the Independent Game Festival, and some of the games that I received are really bad, like total. You don't have to be embarrassed like my game is not up to level. If you have anything worth showing, it's better to show it, because I think you can get some really interesting positive feedback from people who maybe have more years of experience than you.
Mais perguntas? Opa.
Hello, Carlos.
Hello.
What do you consider nowadays, with the game market that we have in all the world industry, what's more important? Because we can see that some game studios create some new game with the same mechanics of another game, just changing all the graphics and the visual effects, something like that. So, what do you think about that?
Well, I think some games will always be successful by just making the same versions with maybe prettier graphics than the previous version, because they are so big as brands, as they're almost products at this point. They have a very established fan base, and it's not going to change much. I mean, Nintendo hasn't reinvented Zelda for quite a long time, and I don't think they have any intention of reinventing it that much, because the fan base is pretty large and they know they got pretty much a winner whenever they make one of those games. I think it's more up to the small game developers to do the unique and new stuff. The publishers are they don't like risk. They prefer to do what they know will sell. And so I know it may sound a bit counterproducing to say don't do what the publishers want, but actually the publishers will realize maybe that you have something interesting, that's something that can make money, after they see the reaction to what you've done in the audience. Because sometimes you make something that suits the people who are behind the companies, they don't understand, but then you maybe launch it and people start commenting it, and you get a lot of press from blogs, and people say, wow, this is so weird, this is so neat, this is so fun. And then you start getting the calls, and then you might get more interest. So for level of starting companies, I think being creative and trying to do new stuff is obviously much more important.
Ok, acho que dá tempo para mais uma última pergunta, se alguém tiver. Ok.
Well, you mentioned you work with the Atlas to create Rock of Ages. How it was to work with when the time for making the game started to expand? I think it is not good for a publisher when you say, well, we'll need another 4 months to finish the game.
Explain to me a bit
how it was to work at Atlas as a publisher to create.
How hard was it to work with them as a publisher?
Yeah.
I actually have nothing but really, really, really good words to say about them, which is very, very, very unusual in this industry. I only hear scary stories and very bad relationship between publishers and developers. I've heard I would say this is the norm. The bigger the publisher is, the most chances that you'll have that they will treat you like you're this little, really small game developer making this little tiny game for us. We sell already millions with World of Warcraft. We don't really care that much about you. But with the smaller publishers, like we work with Atlus USA, the American branch of Atlus, they really get into your mentality. They really respect you as a... I can't talk for all publishers, but when I've talked with other game developers and told them the terms we have established with Atlus, it's almost like impossible, like very strange. And definitely, I think finding a good publisher when you're already established in the business can be critical. You can totally go down in flames if you're not connected to the right person.
Bom, pessoal, queria agradecer imensamente ao Carlos. Acho que acho que o exemplo dele, principalmente desenvolvendo junto com os irmãos dele, desde novo e tudo mais, e por conta própria. É um excelente exemplo de que, para começar, você só precisa começar. Só basta o seu interesse, a sua paixão, a sua vontade e talento também. Então, obrigado mais uma vez ao Carlos.